You're not here to complain about the sound. No.
What's the other hand?
Okay.
Oh, okay, yeah, no,
Come over and start it. We'll run over.
yeah, it happens there.
And then it was like Sunday morning. We just had a minute.
Turn your cell phone off. Okay, 7 o'clock.
If you talk, it's gonna move and follow your voice, so.
Allergy busted as that root.
Yeah.
Resort to texting, what's your number?
Dennis, I can hear us.
Okay. All right, we're gonna get started here. So first off, welcome everybody to the 7 o'clock meeting for the August 3rd meeting of the Village of New Paltz Planning Board. We have several items on the agenda tonight. We have some administrative business, approval of the minutes, any village board UCPB or EPB updates. Then we have a brief summary by our attorney for PB 21AX New Paltz Apartments, followed by public comments. Then we're going to move into application reviews, site plan review for PB 2101 107 Main Street, followed by site plan review of PB 2106 23 Mill Rock Road, and then ending with a site plan for PB 2007 Plattekill and Hasbrook Avenue, the applicant being the Lalo Group. So with all of that in mind, let's get started. So Dennis and Zach, did you guys get a chance to look at the minutes for the July 2021 meeting?
Yeah.
I did, yes.
Fine to me. Any edits that we need to include, or is everything fine on that?
No, yeah, looks okay.
Here, Dennis.
Dennis, let's get your volume on there and get
Well,
your opinion.
he's unmuted. I just can't, we
He's
can't
unmuted?
hear him through this.
Okay,
Everything was fine.
very good. Okay, so I would like then a motion to approve the July 2021 minutes.
So motion.
Second,
I second.
all in favor?
Aye.
So the vote is passed, the motion is passed. So the minutes are approved. Next, do we have anyone from the village board, UCPB or EPB? Seeing none, we're going to move on past that. Followed by a review of the status for PB 21AX, the New Paltz Apartments, by our attorney, Mr. Rick Golden.
Sure, so the scope was sent around for comments that were received by the planning board's consultants, by the town planning board, and by the public scoping session. Those comments are all being coordinated and going to be collated and combined rather into a single document, redline, noting all the comments and requested changes to the draft scope. That will be given to the planning board within a week from now. And then at the following planning board meeting on the, I think it's the 18th, is that correct? 17th. That the board then will attempt to finalize the scope, determine which of those modifications to keep and which to reject, and then finalize the scope. And once the scope is finalized, then the applicant will go ahead and proceed to put together the draft environmental impact statement, which will then be submitted at some point in time. There's no deadlines for them, so they might do it in a month or two, and they could take 8 or 9 months to do it. Some of that is dependent upon the surveys, some of which are seasonal, to be conducted. And so that's where we stand right now.
Very good, thank you. Are there any questions by anyone about the 21AX where we stand? No? Okay. All right, so the next thing we're going to move to is the public comment period. Any online communications will be handled by our administrative, Alana. And so we're going to keep that open until the end of the meeting in case there are any online comments that come through. If you have signed up, if you have not signed up, please do so now. Otherwise, Zach, if you would please hand me that paper. Thank you very much. So we are now going to ask for Jackie Brownstein, 3 Stonehenge Avenue here in New Paltz.
Hello, and thank you again. Can you hear me through my mask?
Yes.
Okay, I'm here today to comment on the Lalo project review. I know I have addressed this issue before at one of your meetings, but since it is on the agenda today, and as the chair of the UAC Affordable Housing Committee, I again want to make a number of comments. First, from what I understand, part of the property on the proposed plan is under a long-standing village deed that is subject to covenants and restrictions, which I don't believe are being addressed in the site plan. Second, I know that this board and the mayor, as well as the town, are committed to the development of affordable housing, but are limited in properties that can sustain a multi-story development. The pit is an ideal location for an affordable housing project. It is within walking distance to village amenities and to possible workplaces like the college, like restaurants, and like stores, and to transportation. It fulfills the village's promise that if it gets funding to improve water and sewage, it can go ahead to develop affordable housing sites. And this is one of the only possible sites that exist in the village for that kind of development. It can be developed with a mix of businesses, services, parking, and multifamily affordable housing units in one building, a village priority for development. I urge you in your review of the Lalo plan to take these key issues into consideration. We have a unique opportunity here. Let's not squander it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. The issue regarding the covenants has come up. You'd like to just quickly address that?
Sure. The planning board does not have the ability to enforce private easements. The courts have been very clear at any time that they try to enforce private easements by saying someone cannot do this because there's an easement that says that you can't do it, it gets shut down. And that's because the planning board's jurisdiction and power relates to the zoning code. It doesn't relate to an enforcement arm to enforce private easements. There was an issue that came up a while back with a village easement dealing with parking. That's where the village actually owned the property, and there was an easement over the village property, and therefore that didn't go forward until the village was satisfied because they were an owner of the property and they needed the owner's endorsement. So this is different. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be addressed. It just means that the planning board can't say, well, there's a private easement, therefore we can't move forward or we can't do anything that's contrary to that. Certainly, the planning board also cannot alter easements that are legally binding. So they could potentially, and any applicant that has an easement on their property that stops them from doing that, they could go ahead and get an approval from the board, but then whoever holds the easement could be able to enforce that easement and stop the project. So it's not that it's not being addressed, it's just that this board only has certain powers. It's not an omnibus board that has all powers dealing with what it is, just like this board can't say to applicants coming up, we only want affordable housing here. They don't have the ability to do that. They have no power to do that. They have to react to an application that comes before them. And as long as that application conforms to the zoning, they have to address it, right? So there are other ways to address that. Zoning is a way to restrict various uses in various areas, but this planning board can't do that. But it doesn't mean that we're not going to ask the applicant to address that issue. The applicant has submitted some documents that it believes satisfies the easements and is presenting a plan that conforms. However, if the village does not agree, then that's something they have to work out with the village. Village doesn't lose rights by what the planning board does here. It just can't overstep its bounds.
Well, who has the authority to do that?
The village. The village easement, the village has the power to enforce that by various means. But it also could be worked out between the village and the applicant, but the enforcement is by the village, not this planning board. But if it ever gets to an approval, what would happen in this as well as other instances that are similar is that the resolution of any approval would say that this approval does not overcome whatever restrictions that may obtain in any particular easement. It cannot modify those easements. And so it may be that this approval may not be able to be carried out if in fact it's in violation of those easements. But it's just a planning board can't come down for that.
Does that help a bit in understanding?
Somewhat. I do understand what you're saying, but I don't understand where in the process that would happen. It would happen after the approval
Well,
of the
it
project?
depends. I mean, the applicant, seeing that there's a potential issue, certainly can work with the village to such a degree that it presents a plan that not only it, but the village believes conforms to these. So it can do that now. And I think, so that's the most efficient way to deal with this thing, is to present a plan that both the applicant and the village agrees that it conforms to the easement restrictions. And then the planning board will simply go forward with its normal process. But I just didn't want anyone to have the false illusion that this board is ignoring it. This board is doing what it can do and isn't doing what it can't do.
You're welcome. Is there anyone else who did not get a chance to sign up and would like to make a public comment on any of the matters before this or other matters? Yes, sir.
I would just like to point out for anyone who's staying, I'm John Capello, here on behalf of the Lalo Group, that we will be addressing these issues, and we have been intending to address these issues, and we will make it part of the presentation before this board. So if you're interested in saying, hearing the truth and the facts about, where we're going, what the process would be, how we intend to work with the village, and have been open to work with the village, we'll be happy to let you stay.
And will that have that testimony will be?
The process we're volunteering for is an environmental impact statement. That is a transparent process that will address every question that the public has, as you heard in the scoping session from the other, that will allow you to review it. We will not just talk about it tonight. We will put it on paper as part of the scope, put our position out there. The village can then put their position out there. We can discuss it. You can review it. You can comment and put your position out there, because what we want to arrive at is a project that everybody can live with. Is everybody happy with everything that can solve every problem? But this is the beginning of the process. Sometimes it seems like people are acting like it's the end of the problem. We haven't really started yet. So
it's a good time to discuss it before it starts. So thank you.
I'm going to interrupt here just a moment, please. I'm going to interrupt, and we need to get back on track here. And if you would like to have a conversation with the gentleman outside, that would be quite fine to do, but we need to move forward with the process for the evening. So with that in mind, we are going to be moving to the application reviews. The first application review that we're going to have is the site plan 107 Main Street, the Lemon Squeeze. Is there anyone here who's representing the clients? There we go, the applicant rather.
Hi, Chairman, members of the board. My name is John Vett. I'm an architect with Allen Ross Architecture. I'm here representing Allen, and our client Ed Harold is also here. There have been some significant improvements to the design since you've last seen it, so I want to go over those. And we've also wrestled and answered the question of the proximity of our property to the religious building on Church Street. We are closer than the required 500 feet, so we're asking the board to refer us to ZBA so we can get an area variance for that condition. I'll just read from our cover letter here the summary of the revisions, and then we can look at the items specifically. Some window locations and sizes have changed. The damaged wood clapboard siding will be replaced where necessary. The kitchen exhaust fans are being relocated from the current position to the side of the building. There's a pergola that's been added to the rear deck. There's a smaller pergola that has been added to the front terrace area. The existing one-story volume at the front of the building is being expanded to the west, a little less than 12 feet, to provide for an accessible entry foyer into the building. The asphalt berm that's at the western edge of that front terrace area is being cut back and eliminated. And the front wood fence that kind of corrals that front terrace area will be eliminated. On the western side, we're proposing a low fieldstone wall to replace that. And on the eastern side, the fence is just eliminated and there is open out to the side. We're looking to do a fabric canopy over the new entry door that would be between that new entry at the edge of the addition and the pergola, the small pergola on the front of the building. Those are the major changes. We've indicated the 462-foot distance on the plans as requested in the last meeting. It shows that we conferred with Corey Worthman in terms of how to determine the exact distance between the properties. So after getting instructions from him, reviewing the Ulster County parcel viewer and cross-referencing with Google Maps, we've determined the distance is short. So that's why we need that variance for that existing condition. Also, we'll be asking the ZBA for a variance for the front pergola. The two of the columns that would sit on that low stone wall at the front would be just inside the setback, 5-foot setback off that front property line. Show you guys that. I think a drawing of that. The drawing we don't have is prepared for the ZBA. It's really about the zoning, but it's just a way of seeing clearly that this blue bar here, that's basically the area that's outside of the setback. And what we're proposing is that the two columns that would sit on that low stone wall in that front area, very low stone wall,
Okay.
would be inside of that setback zone. We are following the line of the existing fence, so we're not encroaching on the sidewalk any further. Maybe to just go through this point by point quickly down our list. Making some modifications to the windows up in the upper apartment area. Here on the eastern side, we're making the windows a little bit smaller due to the configuration, the kitchen configuration of the building. And on the opposite side, facing downtown, we're actually taking one of the front windows, this existing large front window here, and we're relocating it here to the side of the building, replacing the existing square window and the air conditioners that are in the wall, patching that up and relocating that window there for make a nice space on the inside. And you can see in your drawings you have, there's a pergola on the back here. It covers maybe 2/3 of that deck area on the back side. And then there would also be a smaller matching type pergola on the front here on top of that stone wall. The stone wall would run down and really replaces that asphalt berm that's there now, sort of a stamped asphalt, pretty ugly. So that would be cut back. We are actually decreasing the size of that front area by a bit. You can see here indicated in red is the area outside where we'd be cutting back, and we're cutting it square to the building right now. It actually follows that angle, that obtuse angle that comes off the building, which is actually the property line. We're just cutting all that back, squaring it off the building, rebuild it in low stone to more of a historic stone wall, similar to something you might see at Elton Library or something like that. So we're picking up on that fabric of the stone walls you see around the downtown area. The addition that we're doing, and it's inside we're not encroaching on setback for this, it's all within our buildable area. We're pushing out about 11'9" to create a vestibule here, which would be coming just off the sidewalk and allows us to have a nice accessible transition from the sidewalk. Right now, the condition kind of slopes down back up. It's really kind of a mess. You come around down the sidewalk, come in at level, it would be slightly pitched to drain for rain, and come into this area just in front, and then enter it from the side rather than directly straight into the building here, into a vestibule that then allows us to get rid of the obstruction here of the current vestibule that's there, blocks the kind of space inside that big room. Just pulls that line back, lets that room open up in a really nice way, and keeps that vestibule, unobstructed.
So will that vestibule be on the same plane as the outside wall?
Exactly.
Okay.
We're just taking that form, that sort of typology of that, it was an old porch
Right.
that then was enclosed, and we're just taking that same form and extending it over from here to here. Let's just put in a nice big window and have another closed panel area here, whether it be like a menu board or something. And matching that same roof line, that hip roof design that's on the east side, which match on that west side, all we need to match.
Now, in drawing 7, you have, that's the old drawings, that's where the old exhaust fan would be, and you're looking to mount them on the side.
Exactly. So the old exhaust fan comes up and pops up into the actually the roof deck right now, and it's also close to where our proposed terrace would be. So what this allows us to do, we're replacing one larger fan with 2 smaller fans, which is in fact more efficient and quieter. The 2 fans are quieter than one larger fan. So we're putting those on that eastern side that face the parking lot area and not the more open side toward the library, which we think is just a much better location for everybody involved. So that gets them over there on the sort of back side. Okay.
Zach, any questions?
No, these changes all seem reasonable.
Dennis, do you have any questions?
No, it looks fine to me.
No questions here.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Hi.
Okay, so now how high is that stone wall going to be, just out of curiosity?
We don't have a dimension down here, but it would be around 12 to 14 inches tall. We do step it up as it moves back to the hill sloping down.
Right.
So the wall, I guess, in effect gets taller because the hill slopes away, but it would not be taller from the inside. So on the back side here, it's maybe getting to be about 3 feet on the back side.
Okay. Very good. I'm gonna ask our attorney, there were some comments that were included with your summary. Do you want to go through some of those issues?
Sure. First, the height of that wall is going to need to be shown.
Okay.
Because just like a lot of other things that are details that are needed, if that plan gets approved, the building inspector needs to know how high the approval was so that you don't go higher than what was approved.
Understood.
And so if it varies in height, then you pick some points and indicate what the heights are, several interim points. On your plans, you have not deleted it. A note that I think needs to be deleted.
Oh, it's this one in the middle.
Yes, in the middle.
This is
Distance
slight,
from the-
right.
yeah.
Okay,
That needs to be eliminated.
understood.
I know you just simply forgot to delete it, that's all.
Well, we would probably leave the note about the school, the distance to schools, but then we would.
No, it's just that one box where it says that distance from 107 Main Street to closest school is greater than 500 feet.
Right, just strike religious buildings.
Excuse me?
We would just strike religious buildings off of that, because that, it's not correct. But
Oh,
schools,
school, okay, yeah,
right, keep the school right.
that's fine.
Makes sense.
This had been typed under seeker as a type 2 action, but now that variances are needed, it can no longer be typed as a type 2 action because it has to, type 2 actions have to be in conformance with the zoning code. So this will have to be retyped as an unlisted action. So the board needs to take that action this evening. And then once you do that, I can tell you the next step on the seeker.
Okay.
You should retype it at this point.
So I want to get a motion to reclassify the application as an unlisted under the C.
So motion.
Please.
Second,
Aye. So this is
Aye.
typed as an unlisted action.
Right, now this is going to go to the ZBA, so there is a determination on the seeker that you have to make whether to coordinate your seeker review or to have it uncoordinated. Typically, the benefit of a coordinated review is that one board is going to look at all the environmental impacts, and certainly on a larger project that's very significant and very a serious thing and responsibility for that to happen, otherwise it could be more difficult. But on smaller projects, since the ZBA couldn't vote on anything until the completion of seeker, to have it coordinated would mean that you would have it here for the ZBA to be discussed, but the ZBA couldn't make a decision. We'd have to come back to this board to complete the seeker review, then it would have to go back to the ZBA to get a decision. So typically on these smaller ones, where the variances are rather discrete, is that you have in the past taken the path of an uncoordinated review that would still give you the full rights of environmental review for this project as you go through the process, but it wouldn't hold up the ZBA. They would perform their own ZBA review, seeker review prior to making their own determination.
Okay.
And it's our recommendation that, consistent with your past practice and just efficiency of the process, that you decide not to have a coordinated review.
Any comments from any members of the board on the coordinated versus uncoordinated review? Rachel, you need to turn on your volume there. Rather badly.
Fine with an uncoordinated review.
Okay. Just as a note-
uncoordinated.
Okay. Yes. Rachel, you might go ahead and mute between, and you might turn off any music or radio or anything that might be in the background, just for a little bit of clarity with your microphone. Okay, so with that in mind, I also think that Zach, actually, do you want to weigh in on anything?
No, I agree. I think it makes most sense to do the uncoordinated.
So this is my recommendation as his attorney said, we do an uncoordinated review for seeker. So I am going to make a motion then to perform an uncoordinated review of seeker.
I second that.
Need a actually, excuse me, let's back up here. I need a motion then to have an uncoordinated review of,
So motions.
a second,
second,
Second.
and all in favor?
aye,
Aye.
Aye.
Good, so then the motion to perform an uncoordinated review has passed. That's how we will approach it with the ZBA. So the next issue then is that we need to refer the applicant to the ZBA for area variances from the SUP standard that bars cannot be located within 500 feet of churches and from the minimum front yard setback. It's part of our village code. The planning board will not be able to take action on this application unless and until the area variances are granted. So we have a motion. I need a motion then to refer the application to the ZBA for a distance to a house of worship variance for a front yard setback variance.
So motion.
I need a second, please.
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor?
aye,
Aye.
Aye.
We are going to refer this then to the ZBA. What is the date of the next ZBA?
They're on the agenda for August 10th.
So you are then on the agenda for August 10. Very good. If the variances are granted, the planning board will need to complete the seeker before it can take action. So the board is then going to ask you, the applicant, to submit a short EAF Part 1 using the DEC EAF mapper. The EAF that was submitted with the application did not use the mapper. And our attorneys will then prepare a proposed short EAF Part 2 when the applicant is ready to return to the planning board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Yes.
Chairman, the only other thing is that there's a public hearing had on this application on May 18th.
Correct. So will we need a second one?
No, well, it's up to you. And that's why I wanted to bring it up, is that typically you would not do so unless there were substantial changes made to the application.
So what defines substantial changes?
You define what it is, what you believe somehow, whether or not because of the size or because of the impact, it's substantial enough that you should get additional public input. Typically, things like what they're asking are not typically substantial. They will be required before the ZBA to have a public hearing so that the public can weigh in with respect to the variances. But just so that it wasn't left up in the air, I think the board should determine whether or not you think a new public hearing is also required for the site plan.
Thank you. Are there any thoughts on whether we should have a separate public hearing or whether we should allow the ZBA to have a public hearing and take the notes and comments from that and review them?
I'm
I'm
okay
okay
with,
with letting the ZBA handle it.
me too,
Okay.
Yeah.
Me too. Me too.
Okay, so with that in mind, then we're not going to schedule a second public hearing for you in front of the planning board. You'll have a public hearing before the zoning board of appeals, and we will review that and the information we gain from that.
Great.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that closes that site plan. The next site plan is PB 2106. It's 23 Mill Rock Road. The applicant is Lee Frizzell, OBAC, and the zoning district is an R2. And the summary is this application for site plan approval for a 20-foot by 15-foot screened-in porch addition and renovations to an existing single-family dwelling located on a 0.36 acre parcel along Mill Rock Road in the R2 zoning district. So please go right ahead.
Yes, well, we're proposing an addition of 15 by 20 feet, as you mentioned. It's strictly a screened-in porch with a roof over it. We're going to do an intersecting dormer-style roof with matching materials to match the existing siding and finishes. It does sit on the western side of the property, well within all the setbacks. From my determination, I couldn't find any issues in terms of zoning code or anything like that that we are meeting.
Okay. Pardon me just a moment while I
Yeah, sir.
get to the.
So does it significantly increase the lot coverage, or what is the
No.
square footage of
No,
the?
it's, I didn't table here. It was 14% existing, we will be at 16%, and the zoning code is 30% max, so we're well under that still.
This is on the back side of your property, is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
And so the only exterior, all the exterior changes will appear to conform with the rest of the house?
Absolutely, yeah, our intention is to use matching siding and matching finishes, so that in the end result, you wouldn't notice that really anything's would change.
Any comments or any sort of discussion from any other members of the board? No? Okay. So then our next steps are then to type this as a type 2 action. And so I need a motion to approve classifying this as a type 2 action.
So motion.
So motion.
And a second?
Second.
Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so this is now classified as a type 2 action. We do not have to refer this to the county under the general municipal law. Does not appear to be within 500 feet of any designated resource or feature triggering the referral. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to schedule a public hearing for you. Alana, what is the date for a public hearing?
So there's a second meeting this month, that's the 17th, but
Okay.
if we set it for that, we would have to post and mail all the signs by this Friday.
Oh, okay.
So if that's too soon, then they can set it for the first meeting in September, so that's definitely more time.
Brian, do you have try to make the next meeting? We would have to do a post and note and mail.
So
it in
I
by
generally
Friday.
send you everything tomorrow morning, so you have to, I give you the list of neighbors within 200 feet of your property. You just have to mail those out
Okay.
by Friday, and then you have to post the public hearing notice on your property by Friday. It's just everything needs to be posted and mailed 10 days prior to the
Okay.
public hearing. So if you think you can get it done Friday,
Yeah, definitely.
then okay,
For sure.
then they can set it for the 17th.
Great.
Okay, so need a motion then to set the public hearing date for August 17.
So motion.
Second on that, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. We have now set a public hearing for you on August 17th.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So that leads us then to the third piece of business for the evening, which is E2007, Plattekill and Hasbrook Avenue. The applicant is the Lalo Group and the zoning district is B2. They have been here before us. They've been here before to speak to us. But what I would like very quickly for the attorney to do for the benefit of people who may be watching and do not or have not are not aware of exactly what is occurring with this site plan application. So I'm going to ask our attorney for a very brief summary on this, please.
The applicant has been here and has submitted various plans, has submitted more revised plans recently. The board has previously asked for them to make sure that the site plan conforms to all the elements required in the code. There's going to be an issue about whether or not that these most recent ones actually do that. The applicant has submitted a environmental assessment form, and the board has a Their part one, part two has been completed by the planning board's engineer for the planning board's consideration. The purpose of the FEAF, the environmental assessment form, is to determine whether or not the project has at least one significant adverse environmental impact. If by going through the EAF part two, it's determined that there is at least one, then the applicant, the board then can say that it wants to go through the environmental impact statement process, require the applicant to produce a scope, and then they would have to produce a draft environmental impact statement. There'd be public input into the scope for this project when we get to that point. But right now, they have submitted revised plans. They're going to explain those plans, I presume, and then the board can decide what steps it wants to take.
Thank you very much. So we did receive some schematic designs, and we have received some other descriptions here. I don't know if the other members of the board who are not present have had the ability to review those and look at those online, because we did have those as well online. But what we're going then to do is we're going to allow the applicant to give us a quick rundown, or not a quick rundown, on the proposed changes that they have made, so that we can get a better idea of what they're going to propose. So please go right ahead.
Thank you. My name is John Capello. I'm an attorney with Jacobitz and Gubitz, and I'm here with our project architect, Jason Anderson from Anderson Design Group, and Luis Martinez, the principal from the Lalo Group. As Mr. Golden said, we've been before the board a couple of times, working back and forth on revisions to the environmental assessment form and some tweaking of the plan, which is at this point a concept plan with the goal of moving forward the preparation of the draft environmental impact statement. As far as the process, what we would like to do that, the reason for moving in that direction is there likely is, given the size of the project and its location, a potential of adverse impacts, but rather than going back and forth, we would like to use the process in the environmental impact statement process to come up with a scoping outline to address many of the issues that we've seen raised in the public and some public forums, and provide some structure for the review so everyone can have their comments made here. And see, there's some certain issues that are made, and we would just like to have it, like I said, in a structured form, in writing, with our position in writing, to work with all the boards who need to provide input on the issue, to make sure that everybody's working off the same set of facts, that everyone can provide their input in a structured manner, and we can then hopefully reply and revise and work on this project to come up with something that's a set that the village would be appropriate for. Now, the real project, and I'll ask Jason to kind of present the details on the building, because one of the issues is we did provide an elevation to the board and to the building inspector as far as providing the information to make a determination regarding the height proposed in our measurements. We made some changes to the environmental assessment form. We clarified the proposed building, and we do want to highlight that this proposed building will be a 3-story building outside of the 50-room hotel, which will contain office space for the expansion of, I'm not sure the name, it used to be SAM6. That is a village enterprise, a software company that is looking to expand and take space here that will provide good, decent, high-paying, high-tech jobs for the village, and a very tax-positive tax ratio. Now, right now, we show the first floor as a mix of commercial uses, and the second and third floor as office. As one of the alternatives, we could stop it, go through the scoping session, will be 2 floors of office with a 3rd story of residential. Not solve every problem on one parcel, we understand that. I was here before the village probably 10 years ago or so with an affordable housing project on this parcel that needed some zone changes to accommodate an affordable housing project. At that time, the zoning was never changed to allow that project. It's evolved now, and we believe, appropriate balance. Here, or is our applicant saying that you don't need affordable housing, that's not a laudable goal. I spent a good portion of my career working with developers and also being a nonprofit board seeking to provide affordable housing. I've lectured on the issue, I've written articles on the issue, and like I said, I've been here in the village of New Paltz trying to have a project developed. So we understand those issues, but there's so much you can provide on 2 acres. We believe that hopefully, as you go through the process and see the benefits that can be associated with this project, and have your comments and you refine it, that the ratables and the positives of this will fund the provision of affordable housing places and other locations in the village and the outskirts of the town to provide the function. Room will have, as we said, 50 rooms, potential for 50 rooms. Many of them will be occupied and used by Sam 6, who often has people to come in to train and view their software. So they're very excited to see a hotel. And unlike many of the hotels and destinations like Mohawk and like various places and destinations in this area, this will be a place where people who stay after they go hiking or biking or do their research at the office facility will be able to walk to the downtown and spend money in the downtown or downtown businesses. So we believe there's a great synergy there that will provide patients for that, and will, instead of people just coming, going up to the bus and driving back through traffic to go there, there will be a place here to stay and to enjoy the amenities. There will be a restaurant associated with the hotel. And that restaurant will have seating capacity that it will operate as a restaurant sometimes, but also will have the ability to host weddings or parties or gatherings. There'll be a maximum of 300 seats in the restaurant. So I'm going to give it to Jason. We know we've had comments and concerns, and I relate that although it seems like this has been a long time, there's still a lot of hard engineering to occur on this, and we wanted to get through the process and then have that hard engineering come through in the environmental impact statements. I know there's been questions regarding the final drainage plan and the daylighting of certain drainage areas. That's something we're going to have to look at and accommodate in the final design. But we need to get going to get some kind of structure in here so Luis can spend that those funds and authorize the work to get all the hard details done. So Jason, anything you would like to add?
Yeah, so I think just again, Jason Anderson, architect. What we were looking to do here is we adjusted the plan, the overall proposal to try to bring the scope down from what was previously discussed and seen over the years. And so one of the things we tried to do, we kept of course the parking just as we've always had it, which is really 2 levels of basement parking. So that's below where our first floor would be. And then from there, everything else is under a 35-foot building. So that's whether it's the hotel, the 3 stories of hotel, 2-story area, which is the banquet facility, the restaurant, or the office building itself. So we're trying to work within that footprint. One of the things that we did provide, which is really just a study, it's not elevation, because we would consider it to be called an exterior elevation. There's a lot to be done aesthetically. But this really massing study was to determine, okay, where is the grade plane around the building? Where is the building height? So looking through the building, or the zoning within the Village of New Paltz, which almost mimics exactly the New York State building code. The grade plane is calculated 6 feet off of the building or the property line, whichever is closer. So through a series of retaining walls and the natural grade that's out there, we have a grade plane that sets us pretty much level to where most of the parking is now in the village, and a little bit lower. And then we're 35 feet up from there for all 3 floors, which is similar to the surrounding houses. So it's a significant departure from previous versions here. But of course, aesthetically, that's a whole nother piece of the puzzle that we're going to have to work through once we have a direction. We start this process with the full engineering and
One thing I wanted to add before Jason, because I did forget to say, we requested, and we did show the parking along here that was former village parking, so that was part of the 1988 restrictions that those parking areas will continue to be village spaces, and they will 1988 cutting also stuff drainage and address the drainage to make sure the village does continue to be allowed to drain through that property where it's been draining before. The other issues, frankly, weren't raised. The attorney for that we started development has responded to the mayor, and we will include that discussion and negotiations within the EIS with as to what happened in 1968 and beyond. It's a long history and many documents and subject to certain interpretations and positions, discussions, and we would certainly include that. If the board hopefully posdex this tonight in the scoping outline to include the discussion, like I said, in public, in full analysis, so there can be a full discussion and determination regarding those issues, and what we think is a benefit to the project. We were also asking, we did provide in our June 28th submission our position on how we meet the special permit conditions. That was a request by the board at the last meeting. So you have that position. Obviously, that once again is preliminary, and we will continue to refine and add to that as the details as we know more and as we get the hard information. So really, in summary, we're here to respond to any questions the board has and really request that the board would posdex this and maybe set a date that you see appropriate for a scoping outline, and give us a deadline to submit, because we would submit a draft scoping outline for your consideration that will be distributed with the POSDAC for consideration by the involved agencies, made available to the public to comment, and also be distributed to the various involved agencies, and then we would have a public comment period, just as you did with the apartments, to oral comments from anyone who would care, and then we will work with the board to finalize that, to use that as the table of contents for the preparation of the environmental testing.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sure that the members of the board have questions. I know that there has been some questions by one member in particular that we'll get to. But we do have a summary of issues that were noted, and they were on part of the commentary that came to the planning board from our attorneys. And I want to go ahead and let them get started on that, because it may actually, some of the issues that they describe here may address some of the questions that some of you board members have. That, so rather than go through it twice. I'm going to let our attorney go ahead and get started on this so that we can get some conversation, some dialogue going. So would please.
Sure. First, as a preliminary statement, the way that the secret regulations envision the process is that once you have an environmental impact statement, I mean, once you have an environmental assessment form and a plan that you believe conforms to the code, then you are supposed to proceed as quickly as possible to a determination of significance. Here, it's almost certainly a positive declaration as the applicant has admitted. And then once you do a positive declaration, then you move on to the EIS and the scope of it. But previously, the board has asked on several occasions for the prior concept plan to conform to the specific requirements. I think there's 11 or so requirements in the code as to what site plans should include. And you have come a lot closer in doing that, but there are still some items that do not conform yet to the requirements of what should be on a site plan. And I think that the board has to make a determination whether they're going to simply say it's good enough and move forward, or whether they're going to require you to go ahead and add these elements to the site plan before they do their FEAF Part 2 and determine the significance. Like I said, there's some issues that are not there. I can quickly go over some of these. I can also tomorrow send these to John in particular, so that they know that which specific ones they need to be addressing. But if the board is satisfied with this summary as to what should be included, then they can make the determination whether they are going to wait for that or whether or not they want to proceed with the secret.
Well, I would like to hear a description of those issues. And for our board members who are not here tonight, I think this would be good for them to hear and to understand. So if you would, please.
Okay. And again, as I said, the applicant did provide more detail from the prior concept plan. So it's much closer to what's required under the code, but there still are some deficiencies as we view it. One is that under the code, it requires that the site plan show all easements. Now, you referred to the village parking there, but you actually don't show the easement on the site plan. And that really should be on there, especially since that's a am I mistaken?
Well, it shows existing, you want just a reference of that. I don't think there's any description in that 1988 document that says 15 feet or anywhere where I could show a line that says it's an easement. It just says parking, has and show the 15 space. And we can modify the language to say per, wider such and such page, such and such if you like.
You should certainly do that, but I would think, John, you would be able to show an area where the easement attaches to, since I don't think that you think it attaches to the entire property, right?
No, it really,
Because all we have here is it says existing Village of New Paltz parking to remain.
all right, I mean, we can certainly label that or correct, but what I'm saying.
I think you need to identify the area that the easement applies to and reference the specific easement in there.
I will endeavor and work with Justin. I want to just say, I don't think it's defined very clearly in that 1988. We'll do our best to, show an area where we think, but it just really talks in general about parking spaces off of names the road. I don't think, and I will double check, but I don't think it says like 15 feet or off this or area. It's just that existed probably in 1988.
Right, but that's an area, right? The parking that existed in 1988.
Which is what we tried to show, is that where that existing parking is, we just may need to label it correctly. But I understand the position. We can certainly, clarify that.
All right. The second thing is locations, you're required under the code. And this is all with respect to that 21223A-1, and then there's, I think, 11 items that are required. One of them is to show the location, size, and capacity of off-street parking. Now, you listed the square footage of the parking garage and the number of spaces, but you didn't give any other details with respect to the location, size, and capacity of the off-street parking areas. So I think that needs to be described better, consistent with what's required under the code. The third thing is the loading berths. The location and size of the loading berths are required to be shown. The two outside the parking garage have been identified with typical dimensions, but don't show the actual size and don't show any details on the 3 berths inside the parking garage. So that should be labeled on there. Now on signage, the code requires for the specific location and size of signs. Is that something that you have identified at this time, or that's something that you're gonna have to defer?
I would suggest we refer it. I don't, I mean, so much is kind of up in the air. I don't think for us to put a location now, it may deter,
It's typical with respect to especially mixed use applications where what's going to be eventually approved is not yet known. And so it's usually not required to go, I mean, you should put it on the plans if you know what it is, but if it's really unknown because the whole process is going to dictate what the kind of uses are, and that will then dictate the signage. It's not atypical to not have that requirement. In fact, it's the type of project that the size of the signs is simply just premature at this point in time. So I would suggest to the board that given the particulars of this project, as with other projects of similar ilk, that does not need to be on the plans at this point in time. Obviously, before the plan is approved, you will be reviewing those, and of course, they have to comply with all of the code requirements dealing with signage, unless they seek variances. And what about your architectural drawings?
So that's something we're waiting until we get the response really is, okay, this use versus this, is this height, and right now it's premature to go through that. We could change, just like happened last time, where we went through the process and then came back, so we decided this time to hold off until we start to get feedback.
I don't have, personally, it's up to the board, but I don't have a problem again with deferring some of the architectural stuff to later on in the plan. It's also something that you can require to be addressed in the scope in the DEIS with respect to the visual impact. But the specific architectural materials, I think, is a little bit premature. But so I'm not sure that has to be on the site plan at this point in time, but I think it ought to be part of the DEIS because it, whether or not you put up a glass building versus a more traditional building in the village or some other material is actually going to affect the visual impact, which is something that must be studied in the DEIS. Now, one of the other items is, we're probably going to get into this, or Rachel was later, but one of the other required items is any other information that the planning board deems necessary to determine compliance with zoning. And there were issues that were brought up by Rachel with respect to more details on the stream between the project and the park and how that's going to be addressed. I think that that's something that ought to be put in on the plans, but that's going to be up to the board. And a couple of other things, that site plan shows a 10-foot rear yard setback. And Corey should probably confirm this.
Right.
But the village code requires that it's 10 feet or 10% of the lot area, whichever is greater. Did you do that determination and found that 10 feet was greater than 10% of the lot area? It wouldn't seem to me that it would be. But you should make that determination and confirm with Corey so it doesn't delay it further. Next section is 212-13F8B.
I would ask for a 2-acre lot. That's 80,000 square feet, so 10% of that, my math is correct, would be an 800-foot rear yard setback, so I don't know the logic of that.
I'm not talking about the logic of it, John, as you
Well,
know.
all right, so I would like to see if any lot in the village that is actually complying to that requirement.
Well, that's why we're gonna have Corey,
Look at it. And
make this
obviously,
determination.
maybe that's one that has been overlooked in the past. But this obviously doesn't give you any rights to.
Well,
You know that. And it's also maybe something you would need a variance for, and variances are there to vary something on a specific lot, as you know, where it doesn't make sense that a general rule would apply to your properties. That's the whole purpose of the variance. But I think you should look into that and talk with Corey about that. We did have the issue of the height, and I believe that Corey has weighed in with respect to the height of the building. And John
Yes.
can reference that.
In fact, why don't we just take a quick moment here, just to let you know that we did receive a letter from our building inspector. And he states, I reviewed the recently updated documents from the Lalo group for the pit project. One outstanding question I had was the determination of story height relevant to the application, relevant to the applicant determined grade level. Based on the elevation design that has been submitted, I interpret the overheight of this building above grade will be 3 stories, which does comply with the Village of New Paltz zoning code. The 2 floors that exist below are completely encompassed by a retaining wall and fill barrier, which has effectively created a new grade. If the board has any further questions, please let me know. So.
Now, you previously had the floor plans, and you haven't included those. And I'm thinking whether or not that ought to be provided in connection with the planning board's review of the site plan as to how the seating, how some other aspects of your floor plan may affect site plan issues. And then finally, bicycle parking is required in the amount of 1 bicycle parking space for every 10 required automobile parking spaces. And I may have missed it, but I didn't see bicycle parking noted on your site plan. And I think it ought to be, because that's going to be an issue that I think people will be focused on in the village. And Chairman, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments from the board members? Zach?
Yeah, I still kind of trying to wrap my mind around it. The provided elevations did help, I think, and I just wanted to clarify one thing about these. So essentially, the retaining walls will bring the grade up to the level of this parking lot here, right outside this building, correct?
Probably about 5 feet long. Yeah.
Okay. And so then the 35 feet will extend above that. I see. Yeah. I guess I would be okay with not waiting to see full elevations and things like materials until we are doing the scope or the draft EIS, but yeah, I do think that some of the things that Rick just outlined should be addressed.
Okay.
I had a question. on the part 2 of the EAF, it says that the baseline is the water table is above sea level, and I'm wondering about that as well, because it's going to be the parking lot below the building is going to go deeper than that anyhow. So I'm wondering like how you and where that comes from. And then I also had a question about the speed restrictions that were brought up. And I never found how valid they were or whatever. So I would really like to see. I don't know what you're supposed to do that, but some research to that. And then, of course, also, as you mentioned, the street.
Rachel, unfortunately, you're breaking up very badly, so we're not getting complete complete information here from you. I understand that you are asking about the water table and the height and the like. May I suggest that you spend a few moments and text those to Alana, who can then get that information to us as we continue our discussions here. I just don't want to, just breaking up, and it makes it very difficult for us to gain a complete and clear understanding. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, I would appreciate that.
She also sent us the, I don't know, if you wanna, she sent an email a couple of hours ago. So
Okay,
there were some
right.
questions.
Okay.
I don't know if those are the ones that she just.
I am looking for.
I don't have it.
I don't have it either.
I
I have one
have
from
it
her, but
here.
it's
It says, I will.
Okay, there we go.
Comments after the meeting.
Then she says I'm out of press soon, and she wrote a bunch of questions.
yeah, am I correct to suppose the community character? Is that the one?
Oh,
Yes.
that's the one? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I did get that.
Okay.
On the community character issue, that's something that's going to be addressed in the open and environmental impact statement, as are the issues such as water table and things like that. Right now, we're trying to simply determine what else ought to be put in their site plan before we proceed to the next step of POSDEC and going through and analyzing what.
And these are all questions that are definitely pertinent. I'm looking at them now, and they all are questions that I believe need to be answered. They are not questions that at this stage, part of the determination. Right now, we're just trying to determine whether the site plan is complete so that we can then move forward, because we the site plan before we begin the FEAF, so that we can have a full set of details upon which to base some of these questions we're going to ask further. So
But we were concerned about was the stream that I guess bisects the property at some point. And how are you going to address that as far as protections and things like that?
We I've shown where
thank you.
the stream exists and that we're not building in it or will be disturbing.
When you go back and you're revising the site plan to conform, I would suggest that you put whatever notes you believe are appropriate as to what you're going to do there with respect to drainage, even if you don't have a full drainage plan at this point. and any way that you're gonna protect that stream, whether by berms or other protections, whether there's gonna be any crossings over it, et cetera. Just that it's clear as to what you are going to do with it, and then that issue can be addressed further in the EIS.
And is there's another stream that's also noted in the middle of that site plan. Is that one going to be diverted to then to the side to this other culvert stream? It just says rerouted around, but
I think it's called the stream, and unfortunately Justin, our engineer wasn't available to be.
That's actually Stonewall that goes off of Parkman here.
right.
Yeah, so that's all gotta be reworked because it has to end up in the same spot that it is. So we have to deal with our own stormwater and what's coming in. So that's all part of the site plan engineering.
Right.
Dennis, do you have any questions or comments for the applicant?
You're muted, Dennis.
I'm in agreement with the approach that Rick suggested. I think the applicant is going to go ahead and make the changes, and I'm fine with that. I agree with, not agree, but I read what Corey said, so that's all good. So I'd like to just see it move along as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Tom, anything that you'd like to add to the conversation?
I think the, building materials, et cetera, is fine to wait on. I think it would be good if we had the easements noted on the site plan, though, particularly the village's right to maintain the, any drainage or water pipes. I think that's important for us to see, to evaluate.
Okay. So what?
Just on that point, John, if I may.
Sure.
I haven't looked at the easement issue in detail because it's really more of an issue for the attorney. Contact with Will on this, but this easement incorporates some other conditions in another earlier easement, is that correct?
No, there's two documents, as I understood. There's one in 1988 that is an easement. And that reserves to the party the first part, et cetera, a right in easement to maintain any improvements or encroachments currently existing upon Vanderlyn Avenue, and the right to repair and replace the same use and purpose such encroachments now possibly consisting of a parking lot, guardrail, and sidewalk. So we showed the parking guardrail and sidewalk that exists on Vanderlyn Avenue and existed then, and we can put language per easement that the village will continue to have the right to use and maintain those lots pursuant to the 98 easement. Then there is another provision in there that is, once again, just very general, that says the right to maintain drainage across there, and we will show and address that. And
There's no reference to something in 1968?
there's a separate 1968 covenant that I frankly looked at for the first time since I saw a post on Facebook. That talks about the transfer of one of the lots that consists of comprise this lots now, and it seemed to be speaking of what was a kind of a covenant as to the site plan that was approved that was abandoned, and there's another agreement apparently in 1972 that gets rid of a right of reverter, and it had language about size, and then it also gives the village the right to do it. So there's no real that gives the village the right to amend it to make it least restrictive. And then since then, the zoning has changed several times. The site plan that was envisioned in 1968 seems to have been disappeared. So, you know, we can mention it or address it, and I think the best way to address it would be in the EIS, because there's nowhere to, I mean, it just talks general about providing parking and providing the size of the building, which all seems to be based upon a site plan that existed in 1968 and that doesn't exist or hasn't existed. And I'll be, you know, honest, I haven't looked. I know Luis's real estate attorney did look at it and opined. I can't speak intelligently about it, and that's why I thought to address it in the EIS to provide it to the village would be the best way.
I believe our mayor has something he'd like to add to this.
My question about the 68 reference is your 2015 D references the 68. D. And the conditions in. So it's not recently. 15.
Yeah, I'm not, but it's, and I'm not going to opine on it now. That's why I said I would like to put it in writing and sit down and discuss it and see it. But regardless of what it says, it does say the village has the right to amend it in that 1968. You know, so I mean that from there, you know, the EIS can one discuss whether the validity of it, and also provide an analysis, facilitate discussions as to why it may be wise to revise it or amend it. So that's what I would propose, to sit down and meet with anyone, but you know, ambiguous, and we'll address it. You know, that it is provided, we understand how to address it. The attorney from the real estate believes it's addressed, we'll provide that analysis, and we'll, you know, it'll be what it'll be. But in any event, there are a lot of other issues that need to work out with the village. So to say we're going to disregard the needs of the public benefits to try to work something out that pleases everybody is not here to, you know, say this is a fight. We want to work with the village to provide the best alternative and at least provide you the, you know, the spirit or, you know, work to address what the concerns may have been in 1960.
So I think for purposes of just the site plan aspect, I think you note whatever information you can put on there to address the area that it affects, as well as the particulars of it, both graphically as well as in any notes. And then when we get to the draft scope that you're going to be submitting for the board to review, make sure you include in there,
Yes.
as you're saying, as an element that has to be addressed in the EIS is the whole right of the village and that the various easements and covenants. And that will have the village obviously would have an opportunity to comment on that issue in the scope during the DEIS process.
Okay.
Very good. So after having gotten a series of comments from the other members of the board, I had some notes here that I'd like to go through and what my belief is. Our attorney has noted that there are a number, need to conform to a number of requirements for the site plan. Among those, we have the rear yard setback, which we discussed. The parking easement, which needs to be identified and labeled as such. The floor plans were in the previous submission, but this submission limited to the site plans. There's some items that need clarification that need to be addressed between the floor plans and site plan. But without the floor plans, it's really unclear whether these have been reviewed. The bicycle parking has been noted. There are some issues related to building number 2 about the number of seats in total for the restaurant, but not indicating how many seats are in the cafe and banquet hall. In a letter from back in October of 20, said the floor plan was being modified to clearly delineate the different designations, but no floor plan has been provided. Side plan should also note that the spa will only serve local hotel guests according to village code. We also need to have the location, the size and capacity of off-street parking, loading berth size, which is mentioned as well. We determined that the architectural drawings are in the DEIS. And then we also need the stream information on there, as was noted. So my personal belief is that there are some other items as well. I mean, the sketch plan is more detailed than the concept plan, but it still doesn't contain all the required elements. The site plan needs to reflect the issues of parking and a number of these things. I just don't feel that the site plan is complete. And I really personally do not want to move forward until we have a complete site plan. And once we have that, then we can move forward. I don't want to get caught in having something that's incomplete, beginning of the DEIS, and then being held to some of the things that were incomplete. I want to make sure that that is complete before we move forward. And that's my personal belief.
Well, what I would like to ask then is if the board, assume we have an escrow there. I mean, I would like to share as we go through to reply, to be able to contact Rick and your engineer to kind of run some of these things by them to make sure that when we do come back, we do have addressed. Because a couple of the issues I just had a little concern, like for instance, the parking garage. I mean, if I have to show, can I give you a statement that the parking garage is going to have spaces of X by X on 3 floors, or do we have to do the layout of the parking garage to show the parking spaces? If this could change is a lot, so I mean, we just want to make sure we meet that balance that provides you the information you need to make reasonable determinations on the environmental impacts of this without doing engineering on certain issues that until we get that input and we do the environmental review, may switch a bit. So
Well, I think you certainly would need to reach out to both the engineer and to the attorney, but I would ask that you include me in on that.
sure, yeah, yes.
Because I want to make sure that the other members of the board at least get a summary, if not a full technical explanation, but I want to make sure that they get that as well. But that's my,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
that is what I would like. Board, I understand that Rachel does not feel the application is complete. I know that Dennis does feel the application is complete. So we probably should get a further sense of the board. But first, Ricky, we're going to add something here.
Yeah, with respect to the parking, just like it's not a big ask to show above ground parking lots and show.
No.
I'm just saying, I don't think that you don't have to fully design the underground parking garage, but you should have a plan of what the parking spaces are going to be and where the loading berths are going to be and the size of the loading berths to make sure that they comply with the code. So I think that you ought to have a plan on the parking garage. Like I said, it doesn't have to be fully engineered and the structural and everything else, but it should be a plan as to how many spaces are down there, where they're going to be situated. I think that's appropriate to ask.
This is a very big and very important project in the village, and I want to make sure that we do this correctly the first time.
Yeah, we all
do. So that's my motivation behind it. So as I said, I don't feel it's complete. Rachel does not feel it's complete. Dennis does feel it's complete.
I agree with you, John. I think all the things that you listed are things that I would like to see as well. The stream, I mean, I think that even, for me, having a slightly more detailed elevation or something that shows a little more context of the surrounding area would be helpful. I still don't quite understand how the retaining wall interacts with the roadway, this Vanderlyn Avenue, and then these upper parking spaces, so. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's something that could be provided also, but that would be helpful to me. But I think all the, if and that you just listed, then I would be comfortable going to the.
Okay. The FEF.
Yeah,
Tom, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, no, I am in full agreement with you. I don't think the site plan's complete. So, you know, you listed a number of things, and I think if the applicant can address each one of those, then I'd be satisfied.
Okay, so what I'm going to suggest is that you come back to us with a sketch plan that's a bit more sufficient, and that we have the site plan a bit more complete, provide us a plan with the required elements, reflect the issues that of the parking that has been referenced by our attorney. And then we can move on to the FEAF. Once we have those items done, Alana can provide you with those lists of it. I see you've been taking copious notes, but Alana can certainly provide you with a summary of the issues that we have. And then once we get that site plan, we can determine that it's complete, then we can move forward into the FEAF.
That would be very appreciated. And what I would like to suggest that once we get that list, we will maybe give you a preliminary to the board just on how we believe, how we understand we're going to address those comments in the revision. So there's, you know, no misunderstanding, so that the next time we do
Certainly.
that, we can move forward.
Good. And so with that in note, I'm going to ask that all of our board members, you're all given the FEAF part 1 from our engineer.
No, part 1 is from the applicant.
I mean, part 1, part 2, part from our engineer. It's been a long day. So I would ask that you begin to look over this, because if they submit a complete application, a complete site plan next time, we're going to dive into this, and I would like for everyone to be very, very familiar with this. Again, as I said, this is a hugely important project in the village of New Paltz and for what its future looks like. So we want to make sure that we address these thoroughly and in detail and accurately. Any other comments?
I'd like to add, yes, we haven't walked the site. Remember, we were gonna schedule a site visit.
Contact us with the
Can
date.
you hear me?
We can. Their attorney said that we should get together and put a date together when we can do that. What I would like to do, and Alana, I hate to pile this on you, but would you please send out a memo to that effect, and then we can all get together a time that we can do that. I know that Tom's schedule might be different from yours, so it may require more than one visit.
That's fine.
But
I'll leave it up to your attorney. It might be better to do 2 and 3 or 2.
Yeah, and that's probably what it will end up. But definitely, Rachel, I agree with you, and we'll get that together.
We can go right now. Right now.
Well, I'm thinking it may be just a little dark. Any other further comments from any member of the board?
Do you want to mention if you're intending to submit for the second meeting, which is the 17th, you would have to get everything in by the 9th.
Okay, thank you.
So that there would be ample time.
Yeah, we might as well address that now generally, because it's
Sure.
it's the problem that the planning board has had with respect to when all applicants, not just you, but all applicants ought to be submitting things, because the planning board has been receiving some documents within just a few days of the meeting, which doesn't give the planning board or the consultants enough time to really look at it. So as I understand it, is that the planning board would like to have all materials in on the
Monday.
of the week prior to the meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good. Gentlemen, thank you for your presentation. We do appreciate it. Thank you for being here. We appreciate that as well. And we'll look forward to getting your submission, and then we'll move forward on it. With that in mind, The only piece of business left, we need to look at the public comments. Are there any that came in? So with that, we'll note that the public comments have been closed. And we now need a motion to adjourn.
A motion?
Second,
Second.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 And with that, the meeting has been adjourned. Thank you very much for attending.